Hello everyone, welcome to our special segment. Today we have a special guest here with us to talk about the importance of civic education, voting, local races versus presidential elections, and the culture of voting in immigrant communities, specifically the Oromo community. Joining me today is Beirut Abba Fogi. Beirut Abba Fogi was born and raised in Ethiopia. She studied her bachelor's degree in law at the Faculty of Law at Addis Ababa University. She received her master's degree in advocacy and political leadership at Metro State University, Minnesota. She had served as humanitarian aid worker at UNHCR, former teacher at Ethiopian International School in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. She is a former constituent advocate for U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar. She assisted the people of Minnesota with issues related to federal agencies, earning a reputation for her compassionate and effective advocacy. She served as the senior policy aide for the city of Minneapolis. There she led policy and outreach strategies, crafting impactful policies tailored to address the unique needs of diverse communities. In addition to this, she is the founder and the CEO of Aspire Impact Counseling. Currently, she is the operations director for the Senator Amy Klobuchar Senate campaigns. She develops and implements operational policies and procedures to enhance the campaign's efficiency and effectiveness. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Beirut Abba Fogi to our program and stay tuned for more. Thank you for joining us here today, Beirut, and tell us a little about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Beirut. I currently serve as Director of Operations for Senator Amy Klobuchar's Senate campaign. Prior to this, I was at the city of Minneapolis, and I was a senior policy aide for one of the council members. And prior to that, I worked for the same senator, but on the official side, and also on the 2020 presidential campaign. So you could say I am heavily involved in government, especially with my current role, which is related to the 2024 local and federal elections.
So it is election time. We're going to talk about that. Let us start with the definition and forms of voting. What is voting, and tell us about the forms of voting.
Yeah, so voting is a form of, it's a way that citizens exercise their rights. It's not just a right, it's also a responsibility. It's a way where citizens can voice their opinions about laws and policies, and also it's ways where they choose their representatives. As to forms of voting, voting can take different forms, general elections, local elections, referendums, so all of this can be said as forms of voting.
Why is voting important?
Now, that's a really great question. So voting is important for a variety of reasons. The most important one being it's our civic duty. It's how citizens exercise their rights, and also, like I said before, it's a responsibility. It's where you voice your opinions regarding any laws or policies that are going to be enacted. It means by participating in voting, you are exercising your civic duty. And the second one is it's a collective power. It's a where we as people collectively exercise our powers. Any election outcome is gained by if people vote. So it's the way that we exercise our collective power, and then it's also representation. When I say representation, it's the most important way of choosing the people who we want to represent us on local level, on a state level, on a federal level. Yeah, so these are the three most important importance of voting.
Thank you. What is at stake for immigrant and minority communities in this election cycle?
Yeah, so a lot is at stake for immigrants and minority communities, because often immigrants are, not big in number. So voting is one of the ways where they could raise their concerns, they could choose their representatives, and also they could, voice their opinions regarding things that impact their communities, their families, and their state. So the policy impact cannot be stressed enough. It's a political representation. If a minority community participates in voting, is only that community will get representation, and also protecting our rights. So let's say there are certain rights that are threatened as a minority immigrant community. It's only through voting that we make sure we ensure that those rights are protected. So a lot is at stake for immigrant minority communities in this election cycle. I'll come to that. I'll discuss more about what the local races versus the general election, the presidential election, how it impacts communities.
Are there criteria or ways for voters to identify or distinguish their valid candidates?
So every community is different, and their priorities are different, and the rights that they want protected are different. There are some basic rights, but there are also issues that are uniquely important to some communities. So when we choose our electeds, our representatives, one of the most important things that we need to pay attention to is if that particular candidate has their interest at heart while they're filing their candidacy or while they're campaigning, and also by actively participating or engaging, you citizens can make it known to the certain candidates that here are the issues that we care about, here are the values that we want you to promote, and they can have it incorporated. But importantly, as we said before, representation matters, right? For someone to be well represented at any level of government, a state, county, city, or federal, I would say working on getting a representative out of our communities is one of the most effective ways to get that representation.
During the election times, candidates make promises to the community during this. So what should the community do to ensure that the candidates fulfill the promises made during the election?
Yeah, these things don't happen only during elections. It happens with people who are still holding offices. The best way to ensure that communities' interests are protected is to continue our civic engagement duties. I know some communities are more active than other communities in terms of civic participation, but if we're here and we're citizens of the United States, we are residents of the state of Minnesota. So as a community, as a minority community, we do have interests that need to be protected or promoted, right? So the best way for us to do that is to continue engaging with our representatives, participating, voting, and also holding our representatives accountable. That's one of the best ways. Asking questions, whether they're in office or running, you just have to be there, show up. You cannot make as much of a difference by just staying at home. It doesn't matter what your political opinion is, but staying at home, not voting is not an option for any communities. So that's why I'm here to talk about why it's important for us to vote, I'm not here to promote a candidate. I'm not here to promote a party. I am here to talk about the significance of this important civic participation, which is voting, because this year, as you mentioned, we have candidates on the ballots. We have our Congress members running for re-election. There is the presidential elections. There is a state representatives, state senators. So there is, I can't think of, there's a council members, especially in the Senate district that I live. Right now, we have council members running for re-election. So November 4 is the most important day for you to make your choices. But what I would stress is make an informed decision. You have to be aware of the values that you want represented in those candidates, and you have to really ask yourself a question: does this candidate have my values or my interests in mind? The candidate on the ballot. So you really do have to do your research, and then you really have to go and vote. Not voting is not an option.
Let's talk about the local races and the presidential elections. Which one has more impact in our life and why?
Yeah, so let me say a little bit about what those races are. The local races are city elections, council members, mayors, county. There is also an election on a county level. There is a state level, which is where we choose our House of Representatives, state senators. These are local races. And then there is a presidential one, the more general one, right? So we have multiple candidates. We have Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Green Party. There are multiple candidates on the ballot, but you don't hear much about some of the candidates. But that's like, people pay attention to these presidential campaigns because they come in every 4 years. But some of the local races are here every 2 years. I would say, as a person who have been working in government, who have been working on elections and campaigns, I would say the local races are the ones that we must pay attention to, because those are the ones that affect our families. The school board elections. Who do you want on your school board? Like your children go to this school district, and you have candidates running for school board, and then you have council members. What ward do you live, and who are you represented by, and who's your council member? And then there is, again, the state representation. And these races determine our day-to-day activities, whether it's about education, housing, immigration. All of these issues that they promote affect us directly. So the local races, I would say, for immigrant communities, is the one they need to pay close attention to. So the presidential races they're general. They're like a nationwide races, right? So it's more of like the general platform. Like I'm not saying it doesn't affect us directly, but it doesn't affect us like the local races affect us directly, because the president is not going to determine what your kid is being taught at school. The president is not going to determine whether there is a affordable housing in your area. So they work on the general policies where the country, which direction the country takes to, but the ones that are directly affect us, that are in our houses, are the ones that are the local races. So I would say pay close attention to those.
Let's talk about our communities. Why low voter turnout within the Oromo community? We can talk about the youth too.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna speak in general terms. So there's a huge East African community presence in the state of Minnesota, as we know, and some communities, East African communities, are more active in participating in elections than the others. And it has to do with, I think, the backgrounds that these communities come from. I think with the Oromo community, one of the main challenges is there is lack of trust between people and the government because of how the Oromo community immigrated to Minnesota. Most of them came as refugees. They came from a country where democracy is not exercised, so there is a distrust between their government and the community's rights. So that mentality is still here. So that's why there is one of the main challenges within this community is getting people to vote, to go out and vote, to care enough to vote. I don't want to say they don't care about it. It's just like, we will vote, but like it doesn't matter kind of attitude. But it does matter. It matters. Any one opinion, one vote matters. It makes a huge difference over here. So that's one of the issues. And the other one is I don't think we have enough organizations that are focused on working on the community. I don't see a lot of them as much as I see with other communities. So that's also one of the challenges. And I don't want to say there is a lack of communication, because I do know the Minnesota Secretary of State has an Afan Oromo interpreted website materials, just like, you know, any other immigrant communities languages there. So it's accessible. The disconnect is bringing the community and these resources together, and I think it's the work has to be done there. So the disconnect, the gap needs to be bridged. Yeah.
What is your advice on this, especially for the youth? What makes this year elections different?
So to bridge these gaps, number one, there has to be targeted outreach that needs to be done with this community, because there is a huge East African community here in the state, and some of Oromo communities are confused with Somali communities because of how they live, how integrated they are, and some of them actually culturally, our community tends to stay away from government affairs in the state, right? So what needs to be done is bridge that gap, participate and collaborate with other communities, see how other communities are doing this and how they're serving their communities, and learn from them and apply to, you know, this particular community. And as to the youth, yeah, that's another problematic area. It can be a topic by itself, because as a community, we're not visible in the state, right? And that has to do with a lot of problems. One of the reasons is lack of youth participation. We don't see a lot of the youth in the community area. Like, I'm not a great judge of that, because I'm also not very close to the community. I do serve when I can, but I'm not very close. But from, you know, far observation, there is a lot of work to be done to engage the youth, to bring them into the center, and to trust them with you know, duties, to empower them. And I think passing the torch is generally what I mean. So that's the area that needs to be looked at.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add, or anything else our audience should know about the voting?
About the election?
Yeah.
Well, November 4th is a big day. Mark your calendars. And Minnesota is one of the states that have the Voters' Bill of Rights. One of the things that it says on that Bill of Rights is you have the right to leave work and go vote. And also you have the right for the same-day registration. So there are about 14 points there that specifically state that these are your rights on election day. So exercise those rights. Exercise those rights. Go out and vote. Voice your opinions. And also, like I mentioned before, identify what the interest of this community is primarily, right? What are our interests? What is the interest that we need protection and we need to protect? And do your research and look, it's not too late to look into the people on the candidates on the ballot and which candidate has my interest at heart and who can represent me better. Look at those, and if there is a language barrier, there are enough resources with the Minnesota Secretary of State. We can connect with that office and we can have someone come into the community and explain how this process works, and also knowing who represents us currently, and what do we need to change, the things that need to change in our lives, in our families' lives, in the schools, in the communities. Is our elderly being taken care of? All of the things that the mainstream media talks about, all of those things apply to us. So it is very important for the community to turn out the votes this year. All the races are close races. There isn't a race that I don't think it's, especially where the majority of the immigrant communities live, where they live right now. They're tied. The races are tied. So I would say vote. That's my message.
Thank you, Beirut. And what is the easiest way for public to vote, or how can they vote?
Yes, if you are showing this on your screen, I actually will share a link with you. There's a website that you can go to. It's the Minnesota, the Secretary of State website. So if you're not registered yet, please click on this link, and then to check your status, whether you're registered or not, you click on the next link, and then how to find your polling locations. You can click on the third one and it will take you to where you can vote. And also Minnesota has an absentee ballot, like mail-in. People get, they can vote and mail it to their the polling stations. So there are, the state government is doing the best it can to remove the barriers for people to go out and vote. So if you're not able to go out and vote, there's a way for you. If you're working, you have the right to leave work and go vote. If you're not in the state currently, you can do your absentee ballot and vote. So as you see, we're all covered.
We have now come to the end of our segment. Thank you for watching OROMIA11, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe OROMIA11.